And welcome to the Cowbell Kingdom Road Reaction Post-Game Show. I'm Jonathan Santiago. With me is James Ham. And the Sacramento Kings losing to the Chicago Bulls 94-87. Initial thoughts on this game, James. Some people probably thought it was not very fun to watch. I, on the other hand, thought it was a pretty entertaining game. It wasn't a high-scoring game. Both these teams, in fact, shot below 40% for the game. The Kings shot 36.5% for the game, while the Chicago Bulls shot 39.7%. But it was a hard-fought game defensively. I like the effort that the Kings put on that side of the floor, matching up against one of the best defensive teams in the NBA and the Chicago Bulls. Realistically, though, looking at this game, the differential here was 7 points. The Kings went 23 of 37 from the free throw line. If they had just made their free throws, this game probably would have been theirs.
Yeah, John, that's where you hate losing a game, especially a road game, on a long road trip. I mean, if they won this game, they would have been 500 going into tomorrow night's sort of finale for the road trip. And to blow a game on missed free throws, it's just a real bummer. And the thing that really sticks out to me is that they shoot 62%, but again, Jason Thompson goes 1 of 4. But besides that, it's just about everybody missing 1 or 2 here and there, and it just accumulated. That's Isaiah Thomas goes 10 of 13, 5 of 7 for DeMarcus Cousins, 3 of 4 for Rudy Gay. You're just kind of nickeling and diming your way to those 14 misses, and that's just it's kind of tragic to lose a game, especially one that you fought so hard, that you played well in. The Kings got 0 bench production at all tonight, and to still be in it, fighting, again, Rudy Gay not having a great game. This was a solid game where the Kings easily could have won, and I was entertained too. I mean, there were a lot of passes in this game, although they don't have a lot of assists. They finished with 12 total assists. I thought that they actually tried to move the ball a lot. I thought DeMarcus Cousins saw the double team coming quite a bit and moved the ball out of it. I thought that there were some good signs in this game.
Yeah, again, the Sacramento Kings, for whatever reason, they've been able to play the Chicago Bulls relatively tough in the last few years. Now, granted, this is a different team that the Sacramento Kings are fielding against the Chicago Bulls, but they do match up well against the Bulls, and they gave their all tonight. Unfortunately, they just weren't able to come away with the victory. All right, let's move on to our 3 things to watch. We start with, does Jimmer Fredette get a shot against his former team? And that is a big no. A DNP CD for Jimmer Fredette, and as you mentioned here, he has played a total of 17 minutes over the Bulls' last 7 games, including 3 DNP coaches' decisions, now 4 if you throw in this game. And Jimmer really, there might have been a chance for Jimmer to get into this game, considering Kirk Heinrich was battling foul trouble. But realistically, Jimmer Fredette is a third guard on this team, and he's not going to get much playing time for the Chicago Bulls, who are in the playoff hunt in the East.
Yeah, I think he's a third string guard. He's not a third guard. I mean, DJ Augustine is proven to be their third guard. Tony Snell coming in off the bench is playing some guard and some small forward. Even in a game where Jimmy Butler goes 1 of 11 from the field, 0 of 4 from three-point line, he still didn't get a sniff on the court. I think the one thing that adding Jimmer did was, number one, Augustine was already playing pretty well, but Kirk Heinrich was not playing well, and it seemed to have lit a fire under Heinrich. That all of a sudden the Bulls had another player who could shoot 3-pointers and possibly replace him, because he was really having a rough season up until 8 games ago when Jimmer came aboard. So maybe he had a couple of games in there, but I mean overall I think this was this move, while it didn't really help, it's not helping the Bulls as far as Jimmer's production. I think we are seeing a little bit of a ripple effect, and so I guess there's that, but overall, I mean, it sure does look like Jimmer's just not going to play very much at all. I mean, even if he does at all, most of the rest of the season. So, I mean, they're getting ready for crunch time. They're getting ready for the playoffs, and he's just kind of fading away, it seems like.
All right, moving on to point number 2 here on our three things to watch, James. DeMarcus Cousins versus his 16 technical foul. And you know what? I will say that I was quite impressed with the way DeMarcus handled himself and carried himself tonight against the Chicago Bulls. We are well aware of DeMarcus's history against Mike Dunleavy Jr. Over the last year. And, DeMarcus really kept his cool tonight. Obviously, sometimes where he gets frustrated with fouls, but who doesn't get frustrated with foul calls from time to time if you're an NBA player. But, I'd say lately DeMarcus has been much better in terms of keeping his emotions in check. And tonight was a game where you watch, you pay close attention because you know who he's going up against. And like I said, I thought he did a relatively good job. Now, when it comes to the numbers, the final numbers, he did finish with 25 points, 14 rebounds, 10 of 21 shooting from the field. He really came on strong in that third quarter where he scored 9 of his 25 points. So tonight, pretty good game for DeMarcus Cousins, with the exception of the first half where you're allowing Joakim Noah, who is not known as a scorer from that center position, to score 17 of his 23 total points.
Yeah, Noah's really improved, though. And, I mean, he's such a well-rounded player. I mean, look at his stats for tonight. 23 points, 11 rebounds, 8 assists, 5 blocks, and 3 steals. He turns the ball over twice in almost 41 minutes. I mean, that's incredible. And not only that, 3 personal fouls against, one of the best offensive centers in the game, and DeMarcus Cousins. He just, man, again, we go back to, the Spencer Hawes draft, and how Roy Hibbert just completely ruined the Kings' chances of improving greatly when he removed himself from the draft, and basically Joakim Noah would have slid to Sacramento at 10, and instead he went slightly earlier, and because Roy Hibbert had pulled himself out, and the Kings were left with Spencer Hawes. Anyway, again, I think that DeMarcus Cousins has shown remarkable growth. We talked about, I wrote Sunday Musing sort of the challenge to DeMarcus Cousins, and it wasn't so much of like James or Cowbell Kingdom putting a challenge on DeMarcus Cousins, like, look, dude, accept the challenge. It was that he owes this to his teammates, and he seems to have accepted the challenge himself of, look, I am not going to pick up that 16 technical if I can avoid it. I mean, we've seen a really good stretch here where he's trying to contain himself, and this is about growth. I mean, that's what it is. Last season, didn't he pick up a technical in his last game of the year? Actually, I think he picked up 2 technicals and was tossed, right? Where we thought he might be suspended for the first game this year, but technicals don't carry over. So I think that it's a good thing that we're seeing DeMarcus Cousins play with 15 technicals, because it's almost like letting him play with 5 fouls in the early fourth quarter and just letting him play it out and see if he can stay in the game. And so far, it seems to be building, and he seems to be growing from this experience.
All right, our last point here on our three things to watch. Can the Kings post a 500 road trip? As you alluded to earlier in the program, it would have been nice for them to get this win going into Minnesota tomorrow, but that's not the case. They lose tonight. However, again, as we both touched on in this show, we liked the way the Kings played. This was a game that was hard fought on the defensive end, and if they play like this tomorrow in Minneapolis, you've got to think that they've got a chance to win against the Timberwolves, who, for all intents and purposes, are not as good as the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah, they're nowhere near as good as the Chicago Bulls. They're kind of one of those teams that are the sum of their parts are better than, what is it? The individual pieces are better than the sum of the parts. Whatever, I'm butchering that, but they are not as good a team as they are individually, and they do have some holes too. But last time the Kings played them, in Minnesota came to Sacramento and put the loss on Sacramento. It's a good matchup game. It's unfortunate the Kings don't have a chance to come home with a plus 500 record. But either way, if you can finish a 7-game road trip this late in the season when everyone's already sort of given up on you and left you for dead, that's a pretty solid 7-game road trip. I mean, 2-5 is not impressive, but 3-4 would be really impressive, John.
All right, James, player of the game, who you got? Obviously, I'm going to go with the man on the Chicago Bulls, Joakim Noah. You already alluded to his stat line. I'll say it again. 23 points, 11 rebounds, 8 assists, 5 blocks, 3 steals, 9 of 15 from the field, scored 17 of those 23 in the first half. And I was tweeting from the Dime accounts on ESPN tonight for this evening's game, and I sent out a tweet that the Kings were doing a pretty good job defensively on Noah in the second half, holding him only to 2 points. And then immediately following that tweet, Joakim Noah scored probably the 2 biggest baskets of the game for the Chicago Bulls, because not only were they points for the Chicago Bulls, he drew 2 fouls on DeMarcus Cousins midway through the fourth quarter. And that's what he does. I mean, I'm very impressed with what Joakim Noah has been able to accomplish in his career. He's a guy who, he talked about it at All-Star Weekend. He's a guy who was a ball boy for guys like LeBron James at the ABCD camp back when they were in high school. And now here he is, arguably the best center in the NBA. He probably is the best center in my book at this point in the league. And he's a guy who a lot of people looking at coming into the league probably didn't think he was going to be this good, but he's really, really squeezed every ounce out of his potential to be the player that he is today.
Yeah, John, I don't know if I can still call. I mean, for the last 2 months, he's been the best center in the NBA. I'll give him that. He's impressive. And what I love is you got to love a guy who plays so active defensively. And then when he gets to the other end, most of the time when you have defensive stalwarts like this, I mean, you look at Ben Wallace, a guy like that, or there's a ton of them in the history of the game, Dikembe Mutombo. But when they get to the other end, they're usually like, I can dunk and I can rebound. That's all I'm going to give you. And Joakim Noah gives you so much more. I mean, he's basically a triple-double waiting to happen every single night. And, you love the shots, the block shots, but he also gives you steals. Those are huge. I mean, you love the rebounds, but he gets you a huge amount of assists. He's efficient, and he doesn't turn the ball over a ton. I mean, you just really have to admire the player that he's become. And it's taken a long time to get there. It's not like, you can look at his career and mark him down as a Hall of Fame player or anything. But I think he's developed the way that maybe you thought he would when he was, super young in college, and you're like, okay, this guy's got a ton of potential. But then when he first got to the league, it's like, oh, okay, this is really raw, and it's going to take a long time. Now we're kind of seeing it all come to fruition. I mean, he's the best 12.4 point, 11.3 rebound guy that I've seen in a long time. So, I mean, his stats don't jump off the page. Those 5 assists, they jump off the page. But 12.4 points, it sure does look like he does more damage than that.
All right, as we close this thing out, James, any final thoughts as we wrap up this edition of the World Reaction post-game show? Obviously, the Kings heading into the final game of this season-long 7-game road trip tomorrow against the Minnesota Timberwolves. Any final thoughts as we wrap this thing up?
Yeah, I think the Sacramento Kings are playing really hard right now. They're playing solid basketball, and they put themselves in a position to actually win games. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. We've seen a couple of games where they just completely lay an egg, and it's embarrassing. But overall, I think that this team is coming around, and you have to wonder what this summer holds. Now that we're getting this close, you have to start looking at this summer and say, is this going to be a summer where they take this core and they build, or is this going to be a summer where they lose 2 of their 3 huge pieces and this thing goes right back to the beginning, and we're wondering where this team is going to be as far as wins and losses next season. I think right now we're seeing a team that is motivated and playing their way towards something. They're building on something for next season, and that's really, really good. I think that's something that Kings fans and the management and Coach Malone has been pining for. Please show me that you got something. Please show me that you want to be here and that we're going to carry this thing forward. I think that they had taken a few steps back, and we're kind of seeing this team back on the right path, where even if they do lose, they're spirited losses, they're moral victories, they're things that when you really look at they out rebound this team 55-40. I mean, those are incredible numbers. Those are things you're looking for that shows effort, and that's a good thing.
All right, the Sacramento Kings falling to the Chicago Bulls 94-87, and we'll be back tomorrow for our final road reaction post-game show of this 7-game road trip when the Sacramento Kings take on the Minnesota Timberwolves. So thanks for joining us again. For James Ham, I'm Jonathan Santiago, and thanks for tuning in to this edition of the Road Reaction post-game show here on CowbellKingdom.com.